Let me There's a couple readings today. This week, first of all, it's Parshat Terumah. And of course, as many of you know, the name of the Torah reading section comes from the first distinctive word in the reading. And this begins on Exodus 25. Where it says, Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Daber el bnei Yisrael v'ikhu li terumah. Tell the Israelite people to bring me terumah. That's offerings or donations or gifts. You shall accept gifts for me from every person whose heart so moves him. And these are the gifts you shall accept from them: gold, silver, and copper, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen, goat's hair, tanned ram skins, dolphin skins, and acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil and for the aromatic incense, lapis lazuli and other stones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastpiece. Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham. And let them make me a mikdash, a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. Let them build me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them. Exactly as I show you, the pattern of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, and the pattern of all its furnishings, so shall you make it. So this whole portion is instructing the people of Israel, is beginning to instruct the people of Israel on how to make this tabernacle, how to make this sanctuary, which will be in their midst, and that all those who are willing shall bring what is necessary to create it. The people build a Mishkan, a sanctuary, and they put the Mishkan in the middle of the camp. So God's presence descends upon the Mishkan, or the sanctuary, so therefore God's presence is in the middle of the camp. Or the people build a Mishkan, a sanctuary, and God's presence is felt inside the individual builders. So God's presence dwells inside each of the builders. God's presence dwells inside each of those who offer things up, and each of those who are involved in the creation of the structure. Because the text says, let them build me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them. I will dwell within them. It's not very clear. So it can mean all of it. And on a basic level, there is a profound spiritual truth here. Spiritual insights need to be housed in a structure. Things may be true in the abstract, but to be felt as personal and social realities, they need a structure. And we are called upon to bring from our life to create such structure so that those spiritual insights, that spiritual presence can live among us, live within us. This is part of what we do through ritual, observance, celebration, artwork, something in the physical realm to house something in the spiritual realm. We build the structure with our community and with ritual. We bring from our own lives, our own time, our own energy, our own material substance and possessions, our funds, and we create structure. physical structure, social structure, ritual structure, times and routines, so that we can experience this presence. The asuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham. Let them build me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. On Purim, we have 4 primary rituals with which to create structure for the Purim message. The 4 mitzvot of Purim are reading the Megillah, that's the book of Esther, giving tzedakah to the poor. Even if you're very poor, you're supposed to give tzedakah. The codes say, even if it means 2 poor people exchange tzedakah with each other, so that neither has actually gained anything by receiving, but they've both gained something by giving. Gifts to the poor to each other is the 3rd, and the 4th is a Purim Suda, a Purim feast, often done with great rejoicing and joviality. The practices are full of silliness, ad lo yada, that's a phrase, ad lo yada, until you don't know. Until you don't know the difference between cursed Haman and blessed Mordechai. That's why it's even considered a mitzvah to drink, but not if you're going to drive, okay? But it's considered a mitzvah to drink on this day. Ad lo yada, till you don't know the difference between cursed Haman and blessed Mordechai, and all the rest of the year, you don't do that. We have costumes, noise making, silly readings and songs and antics. But what is the content of this structure? We have this silliness, but what is the presence? What is the content of it? It is not silly and it is not childish. It is not silly and it is not childish. Part of the structure of observance building up to Purim includes this Shabbat. This Shabbat is called Shabbat Zachor. Shabbat, the Shabbat where we read the section called, which begins with Zachor. It's a command, remember. So I will read those few verses from Parshat Zachor. Deuteronomy 25, 17, 18, and 19, which begins, Zachoret asher asa lecha Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to you on your journey. Amalek is a people. Remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt. How undeterred by fear of God, he surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary, and cut down all the stragglers in your rear. Therefore, when the Lord your God grants you safety from all your enemies around you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. First of all, the Torah describes elsewhere how as the children of Israel come out of Egypt and they're wandering through the wilderness, and the elderly and the sick are wandering in the back of the line, and the people of Amalek attack the elderly and the sick at the back of the line. So the Torah says, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. And here we are confronted with the curse and the blessing and the curse of a memory, of communal memory. We Jews have a long communal memory. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. Remember those who died in the Holocaust so they do not die a second death. Remember those who came before us at Yortzeit and Yizkor. All of Jewish life is about remembering. Remember who we are. Remember what we are committed to. L'man tizkaru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, which we say in the Shema, that in order that you should remember and do all my mitzvot. Memory. We see this mostly as a positive. I remember years ago during the civil war in Yugoslavia, when Elie Wiesel visited Bosnia during the midst of that terrible war and lamented about the double-edged sword of memory. He talked about how Jews value memory. And yet he said, if only the people in the Balkans could forget how they harmed each other centuries ago, they would no longer seek revenge and they could live in peace. That is true for all of us. Memory is a double-edged sword. The lack of memory among Americans is America's blessing and curse. The lack of memory in American society is part of why we can get along with each other so well most of the time. It's also part of why we keep on making the same mistakes over and over again. So this section says, wipe out the memory of Amalek. Do not forget. How can you do both? Wipe out the memory. Don't forget. Don't forget to forget. And ironically, we're the only ones who talk about Amalek every year because we were told not to forget, to wipe out the memory. Forget. Thankfully, we no longer remember who Amalek is. There's no clear people we can point to. So this cannot be interpreted as a commandment of all things to commit genocide. For thousands of years now, 2,000 years at least, this mitzvah, wipe out the memory of Amalek, do not forget to forget. For 2,000 years, this has been read as a command to fight against social forces that work to tear us down as a people, work to tear us down as a community, or in the Zohar, the central book of Jewish mysticism, this command is seen as a commandment to wipe out the evil inclination among us. Amalek, the evil inclination. So wiping out Amalek becomes an allegorical commandment to wipe out forces of destruction. Perhaps that is a corollary of the idea of building structure in our lives for God to dwell in our midst. Along with that is wiping out forces of evil so that they don't dwell in our midst. It is no longer about a people of Amalek at all, but about safeguarding Jewish heritage and the Jewish people and the Yetzer HaTov, the good inclination. But at the time of King Saul and the prophet Samuel, in the book of Samuel, this commandment clearly was taken quite literally. Samuel instructs Saul to wipe out the people of Amalek, and Saul takes tremendous steps to do so. He just doesn't go as far as Samuel would like. He spares the animals or the choice among the animals, and he spares the king of Amalek, whose name is Agag. And what happens there is an entirely other story. You can read it in the book of Samuel. It's 1 Samuel chapter 15. It's also this week's Haftorah, and it is very sad and troubling for all concerned, then and now. If you don't have a Tanakh or a Chumash at home in which to look this up, this coming week perhaps is a good week to get them so you can have it, or you can look it up online. You can find it online too. That was not second nature for me. I had to go back and put that in because you can actually look for these things online. But the connection to Purim is clearly made in the book of Esther through Haman. Haman represents Amalek. Haman represents all that we need to wipe out from the world. And the book of Esther makes that crystal clear when Haman is introduced in chapter 3 of the Megillah, of the book of Esther. when Haman is introduced, Haman is called Haman ha'agagi, Haman the Agagite. Haman the Agagite. And the book doesn't say any more than that, but it's clear. Ha'agagi, Agag, as I said a moment ago, was the last king of Amalek. So Haman is clearly labeled in the book of Esther as Amalek. So when we drown out the name of Haman in the reading of the Megillah, we are literally wiping out the name, drowning out the name of Amalek. We're drowning out the name of the descendant of the last king of Amalek. That's why there's also a tradition of writing Haman, in chalk on the soles of your shoes. And during the reading of the Megillah, you're wiping the name of Haman, wiping the name of Amalek away. So these are dark images in the middle of Purim. Dark images hiding in plain sight within the book of Esther itself, which we make so much light of with all of the Purim silliness. All of that Purim silliness, we're making such light of these dark images. So Purim at its core is not a children's holiday. In general, we should never reduce Jewish life and practice to the province only of children. Perhaps the biggest threat to Jewish life these days is what I call pediatric Judaism, as thought of by adults. And perhaps on Purim of all days, we should acknowledge that and strive to limit the scope of pediatric Judaism. Pediatric Judaism is fine for children, but among adults, it is fatal to Jewish life. Purim is not childish. Purim is not a children's holiday. The structure which we build in which to experience Purim is built of silliness, but it is grounded in profound life issues, fearful issues. In the book of Esther, we as a people are almost annihilated, and not for the last time. And then we respond with silliness, ad lo yada, until we cannot distinguish between cursed Haman and blessed Mordechai. There is also a historical tradition of localized or privatized private Purims. A Purim, a particular town might have a Purim that's particular to themselves. The town might have an anniversary because there was a year at that time that they survived an earthquake, or they survived an attack, they survived a siege, or a decree against the Jewish community was lifted. There are family Purims where someone survived a disease or avoided incarceration by the reigning ruler, and so decreed that every year the family would have a private Purim, a family Purim. There are historical localized Purims that mark the lifting of a plague. There was a plague and the plague ceased. And the day the plague ceased, a communal Purim was declared and then celebrated every year thereafter. I have been imagining that when today's pandemic is declared over, we might want to declare a Purim celebration and hold on to it for years to come. That is how this tradition of community and family Purims has worked. This year, 2021, 5781, Purim marks the moment on the Jewish calendar of the anniversary of the COVID lockdown in the United States. If you'll remember, in Harrisburg, the Jewish community's last set of face-to-face events were the Purim Carnival and the Women's Megillah reading. Purim took place, and then everything shut down. So as we approach Purim, which is this Thursday night and Friday, we are approaching, on the Jewish calendar, the end of the first year of this lockdown, this shutdown. Purim is about profound vulnerability, about how life can be turned on its head at a moment's notice by one massive event like a decree caused by a chain of smaller, seemingly random or chance events, by a virus, or by an ice storm. Purim can speak to the precarious position of the Jewish people in particular, through the generations especially, but not only in the diaspora. Purim can also speak to the precarious position of life in general for every community and individual for any reason. For some reason, the response we take with Purim to the threat of immense tragedy and to the reality of great precariousness in our existence, the response we take is one of great silliness. Silly until we don't recall the difference between Cursed Haman and Blessed Mordecai. Is this because we want to forget? My grandparents, who escaped Vienna in 1938 and came to the United States in 1940, learned in 1945 that almost everyone and everything they had known before the war had been annihilated. They and their friends from Vienna, who they came to know in the New York area, responded with an informal social network that they called the Forget and Be Happy Club. Forget and Be Happy Club. Was that an expression of Purim? Sort of? Or is there some expression of faith or faithfulness we find in Purim that we are to continue as if everything is and will be fine, even in the face of great potential tragedy? To draw on a midrashic story connected to our next holiday, Passover, there's a story when the people of Israel reached the Sea of Reeds after fleeing from Egypt. They're being chased by Pharaoh, whose armies are on one side of them, while the sea is on the other. And then God splits the sea so that the people can pass through to the other side. But before God will split the sea, according to Midrash, at least some of the people have to get into the water up to their nose. According to Midrash, it was a man named Nachshon ben Aminadab who rushed into the water first, up to his nose, fully confident that the sea would part, which is then when the sea parted. Maybe on Purim, we are saying we need to have the trust and strength of Nachshon to simply dive into the waters up to our noses before the sea will split. To live life here and now to the fullest with joy and gratitude, even in the shadow of all that can go wrong, because only our decision to choose life will enable that fullest life to unfold. I wish everyone a joyous, happy Purim Yontif, Purim Chag Purim Sameach, a happy, joyous Purim. Let's join together for Purim on Thursday night by Zoom at 7 o'clock with the congregation in Sunbury. Temple Beth Shalom is going to Sunbury, along with others in the Jewish, the Jewish Community Legacy Project, Central Pennsylvania Small Communities Initiative. That's a long word, long phrase, but we're going to be, we're getting together with Rabbi Nina and Sunbury, and I haven't received the link yet, but we'll be getting that out. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.